My younger son, Ivan, is a pilot. Yesterday, he called me in the middle of his layover. His voice was tight, uneasy. "Mom, something strange is happening." I paused, a dish still wet in my hands. "What is it, Ivan?" "My sister-in-law is at the house, right?" "Yes," I answered, without thinking. "She's here. She's in the shower." Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "That's impossible. I have her passport in my hands. She just boarded my flight to France." At that exact moment, I heard footsteps behind me. "Mom, I'm glad you're home," a familiar, calm voice said from the hallway. The plate slipped from my hand and shattered. If you're watching this video, tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story from. I want to know how far it travels. That morning had begun like any other. The air smelled of coffee, and the sink was full of breakfast dishes. Stephen, my older son, had already left for work before sunrise. Matthew, my 7-year-old grandson, that mischievous little genius, had caught his school bus, waving from the window. And Araceli, Stephen's wife, was upstairs, moving around softly, humming to herself. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower," she had called out from the landing. "Okay, sweetheart," I'd replied, smiling. I was rinsing the last cup when the landline rang. I dried my hands on my apron and picked up. The cheerful voice of my younger son filled the room. "Hey, Mom, just calling to say hi. I'm at the airport, layover before my next flight." Hearing him always brightens my heart. Ivan's the one who never stopped chasing the sky. My pride, my little boy who used to build paper planes in the living room and swear one day he'd fly real ones. We chatted lightly. He told me about his crew, the turbulence, the weather over the Atlantic. Everything was fine, until his tone shifted. "Mom, something weird just happened." My hands froze over the sink. "What is it?" "My sister-in-law is at your house, right?" "Yes, honey. Araceli's upstairs taking a shower," I said, glancing toward the stairs where water still splashed behind the bathroom door. He went quiet, so quiet I could hear his breathing. Then, steady but astonished, "Mom, that's impossible. I'm holding her passport. She just got on my flight to France." I laughed lightly, trying to push away the chill creeping up my arms. "Oh, Ivan, you must be mistaken. I just talked to Araceli not even 10 minutes ago. She told me she'd take a shower." But Ivan didn't laugh. His next words came slow, measured. "After boarding finished, I went back for some papers I forgot. I found a passport lying near the gate. I was going to hand it to security, but when I opened it, Mom, it was her photo, her name, Araceli. No mistake." My stomach tightened. Still, I forced calm. Maybe it's someone else with the same name. He sighed, a sound caught between disbelief and fear. "Mom, listen. Just went down the passenger cabin. She's there, first class, sitting beside a man who looks rich, older, well-dressed. They were talking close, like a couple." For a second, the whole room spun. His words stabbed through the air. A couple. Impossible. I had heard her voice upstairs. I had seen her in this house not even 15 minutes ago. But before I could think further, the sound upstairs changed. The shower stopped. Silence. Then the creak of the bedroom door. Footsteps on the stairs. "Mom, who is it?" Araceli's gentle voice floated down. My blood ran cold. My hand shook as I gripped the receiver. "Just a friend," I managed, forcing steadiness that wasn't there. I stepped away into the living room, my pulse thundering in my ears, trying to keep my voice calm as her shadow moved at the top of the staircase. Araceli leaned slightly over the railing, her hair wet, her white blouse clinging to her shoulders, the same blouse I had seen her wearing earlier. She smiled faintly. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my throat dry. Yes, I'm fine," I murmured. But inside me, panic coiled tighter. On one end of the line, my son swore he saw her flying to France. On the other, I was staring straight at her, standing in my house. Which meant one thing. Either my son was wrong, or something in my home wasn't what it seemed. The receiver almost slipped from my shaking hands. The living room suddenly felt smaller, airless, even though sunlight poured through every window. I sank onto the couch, gasping, my chest tight under the weight of questions that made no sense. If Araceli was here, then who was the woman on Ivan's flight? And if that woman was Araceli, who then was the one inside my house? A few minutes later, she came down to the kitchen. Her hair still damp, a clean light blue dress clinging softly to her shoulders. She smiled, warm, ordinary, like every other day. "Mom, I'm going to the market early today. Do you want me to get you any vegetables or anything?" Her tone was calm, familiar, the same melody I'd heard for years. I forced my lips into a smile, though my throat burned dry. "Yes, honey. Bring some tomatoes, please," I said, every word trembling. She nodded, picked up her wicker basket, and walked out. Through the window, I watched her silhouette pass through the gate, sunlight catching in her hair before she vanished. I stood there, frozen. Ivan wasn't a liar. My son had no reason to invent a story like that. He'd always been the honest one, gentle, affectionate, steady, and yet Araceli, my daughter-in-law, the woman I'd lived with for years, had been here, in front of me, breathing, smiling, unmistakable. Could there be something I'd missed? Some secret in this house an old woman like me had never noticed? The clock ticked somewhere behind me. The sound of it scraped my nerves raw. I sat motionless in the living room while the midday light filtered through the lace curtains, painting thin stripes across the tiled floor. Even the old armchair where I usually knitted or read to little Matthew seemed heavier, darker now. Ivan's voice echoed again and again inside my head. Every sentence he spoke hit me like a hammer. I looked around the walls covered with family photos, Stephen and Araceli on their wedding day, smiling like they had captured happiness forever. Newborn Matthew, wrapped in blue. Ivan beaming in his first pilot's uniform. Those memories used to make me proud. Now they looked blurred, veiled in doubt. My name is Stella Brooks. I'm 65 years old, a widow, living quietly in a middle-class neighborhood of Phoenix, Arizona. My husband, Raphael, died 10 years ago. He left me with 2 sons, who became my whole world. Stephen, the eldest, an architect buried in his blueprints and deadlines. Ivan, the youngest, my pride, who chased his childhood dream of flying until he caught it. My days revolve around Stephen's small family, his wife, Araceli, my beloved grandson Matthew, and the gentle rhythm of our home. Araceli had always been the perfect daughter-in-law, beautiful, meticulous, tireless. Her hands always busy, her hair always neat, her clothes spotless. She carried herself like someone born to be a wife and mother. I still remember their wedding day. It was held in her parents' backyard. Simple, joyful, glowing under string lights. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they gave everything they had to make it beautiful. Araceli walked into my life with that confident smile, eyes bright, as if the whole future belonged to her. I used to think I was lucky, so lucky, to have her. After she left for the market, I remained seated, my fingers gripping the edge of the tablecloth without realizing. Ivan's call forced me to replay every small detail I'd ignored. Moments that had seemed harmless now twisted in my memory. There were days she'd leave the house saying she was going to the market or visiting a friend. But when she returned, her eyes looked different. Sometimes she was sweetness itself, hugging Matthew, singing softly until he fell asleep in her lap. But other days, she'd return cold, distant, easily angered, snapping at me over nothing, her patience gone, her smile replaced by something sharp and unfamiliar. And I had told myself she was just tired. Now I wasn't so sure. Sometimes she'd snap over the smallest things. A towel not folded, a spoon out of place, the salt shaker left beside the stove. I used to think they were just the mood swings of a young woman. Now, I wasn't so sure. It felt like someone was slowly unthreading all the memories I'd carefully stitched together over the years. One day, months ago, I'd seen her write the grocery list with her right hand. Neat, precise, beautiful handwriting. The next day, she used her left. The letters shaky, looping awkwardly, like someone forcing themselves to mimic another. "Since when do you write with your other hand, honey?" I had asked. She laughed quickly. "Oh, just for fun, Mom. I'm practicing." Back then, I smiled and moved on, but now that memory pressed sharp against my mind like glass. I was still lost in thought when the front door burst open. Matthew came running in, backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grandma," he shouted, throwing his arms around me. "The teacher said my drawing was the best in class." I hugged him, brushing his hair back with trembling fingers, forcing a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." He dropped his bag and pulled out a notebook. "Look, Grandma, yesterday Mom helped me with my homework with her right hand. See how pretty it looks? But today she used her left, and it's uglier." He pointed to 2 pages, one with tidy letters, the other messy and unsure. I stared at them, my stomach twisting. "Your mom was probably tired today," I said softly. But Matthew looked up, frowning in confusion. "Grandma, Mom is weird. Some days she hugs me so tight, but other days she doesn't even look at me." His words hit harder than I expected. I wrapped my arms around him again, but my thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, stood smiling on the porch, holding the plate Araceli had given her yesterday. "She's such a sweet woman," she said warmly, then paused. "But something odd. She handed me the plate with her left hand. Didn't you say she's right-handed?" I forced a thin smile. "Maybe she uses both, Helen. Come in for some tea." We chatted for a while, but her words stuck in me like a thorn. It wasn't just me noticing anymore. When she left, I sank onto the couch, one hand pressed against my chest. The room felt cold. The world unsteady. Later that afternoon, I went to water the garden. The sun was dipping low, painting the daisies in gold and shadow. But my thoughts were dark. Matthew's words, Mrs. Collins' voice, Ivan's steady warning. They all echoed in my mind, rippling through me like stones dropped in still water. I stared at the watering can in my hand and whispered, "Am I blind? Or have I just refused to see the truth right in front of me?" The gate creaked open. Araceli walked in, carrying her wicker basket in her left hand. I froze. She'd always carried it in her right. Always. She set it on the kitchen table and smiled at me. "I got tomatoes, cilantro, and fresh fish. I'll make the roasted fish you love tonight, Mom." "Sounds good." Her voice was gentle, sweet, perfectly ordinary. But my eyes didn't move from her hands. The left one. No, the right one. I turned away, pretending to clean the table, but my pulse was hammering against my ribs. Was I overthinking, or were these tiny details whispering something I wasn't ready to hear? That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Stephen came home tired, shoulders heavy from work, but he still smiled at Matthew. "How was school today, champ?" Araceli, calm and composed, ate slowly. Between bites, she turned to Stephen. "Honey, remember the parent-teacher conference next week. Take the day off." Her tone was soft, familiar, the same woman I'd proudly called my daughter-in-law. But Ivan's words echoed in my head. "She's sitting in first class, next to a man." I forced a smile, bit my lip, and swallowed the ache that felt like a stone stuck in my throat. 3 days later, everything changed. Matthew dropped a glass of water during dinner. The splash soaked the tablecloth. "It's okay, honey," I said, laughing gently. "Just be more careful next time." But Araceli's expression sharpened. "Matthew, why are you always so clumsy? Pay attention." Her tone cut through the room. Stephen frowned. "Araceli, it was an accident." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "You always defend him. You make me look like the bad one here." The air turned heavy. Matthew looked down, tears gathering. I pulled him close, my heart aching. Just days ago, she had lovingly reminded him about school. And now she sounded like a stranger. I sat quietly beside her, my mind racing. Yesterday she was gentle. Today, irritable. Yesterday she used her right hand. Today, her left. Little by little, these inconsistencies piled up like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. I tried to calm myself, but every time I looked at her, I saw someone else wearing my daughter-in-law's face. A few mornings later, I walked Matthew to school. His small hand clutched mine. Halfway down the cobblestone street, he stopped. "Grandma," he said softly. "Yesterday, Mommy taught me to write. She was so nice. Her handwriting was beautiful. But today, she didn't even look at my homework. She told me to do it alone." I knelt down, staring into his innocent eyes. "Your mom was just busy, sweetheart," I whispered, but my voice trembled. He nodded, but his eyes, those pure, trusting eyes, were filled with confusion and hurt. He was only 7. How could he understand something I couldn't explain myself? That night during dinner, Araceli reached into her bag and took out a notebook. She began writing with her left hand. Stephen laughed lightly. "Since when do you write left-handed? Looks weird." She froze, just a fraction of a second, before forcing a smile. "Oh, just experimenting," she said quickly, and tucked the notebook back into her bag. But I saw it, that brief flicker of fear, in her eyes. Stephen said nothing, but his expression changed too. I gripped my spoon tightly, pretending to eat, while inside my doubt grew like a slow-burning fire. The next morning, I decided to visit Mrs. Collins, our neighbor across the cobblestone street. A few weeks ago, Araceli had borrowed a spice jar from her to make chili. I took the empty jar, walked over, and knocked. "Stella, come in, I'll make coffee." Mrs. Collins greeted warmly, wiping her hands on a rag. I handed her the jar, planning to leave, but she insisted I sit. The kitchen smelled of roasted beans and fresh bread. Cozy, ordinary. But her eyes, they carried something else. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Stella, please don't be upset by what I'm about to say. But has your..." Mrs. Collins' words hit like a quiet storm. "Has your daughter-in-law's personality changed lately?" She asked gently. "One day, she greets me with such warmth, even asks about my kids. But yesterday, she passed right by me, didn't wave, didn't even seem to know who I was." Her tone was hesitant, but the concern in her eyes was real. Another stone dropped into the uneasy lake inside my chest. I forced a smile. "She must have been in a hurry, Helen. You know how young people are." But my voice sounded hollow, even to me. Mrs. Collins wasn't someone who gossiped. She noticed things others missed. If she had seen something strange in Araceli, and it wasn't just my imagination anymore. I sipped the now cold coffee, stayed a few minutes longer, and then stood to leave, my heart leaden. On the way home, I stopped at Mr. Johnson's bakery, a place where I always bought sweet bread for Matthew. "Mrs. Brooks," he said cheerfully, "what can I get for the little champ today?" I smiled faintly. "The usual, Joe." He wrapped the pastries, then glanced up. "You're Stephen's mom, right? Your daughter-in-law came by this morning." He chuckled softly. "Last week she was all smiles, even said my bread was the best she'd ever had. But today, He hesitated. Today she looked angry, didn't even say thank you, just left. My fingers tightened around my purse handle. She must have been tired, I muttered quickly. I paid, thanked him, and hurried out before he could say more. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sounds of the neighborhood settling into night. I sipped my tea and smiled softly. Angela had become someone who could navigate life with her own wisdom, someone who would value her family, her work, and herself. She had grown in ways that money could never buy. The next morning, I heard her humming as she prepared breakfast. It was a light, cheerful sound that seemed to fill the entire house with warmth. I realized that the lesson she had learned wasn't just for her. It had reminded me of the power of patience, foresight, and love guided by wisdom. Over the following months, our lives settled into a rhythm that was both fulfilling and humbling. Angela's days were spent studying, volunteering, and working, but she carried herself with pride and dignity. She was learning the kind of success that doesn't just fill a bank account, but fills a life. And in her eyes, I saw gratitude, not just for what I had done, but for the life she had earned herself. One evening, Aurora visited, as she always did, bringing with her the warmth of friendship and the voice of reason. She looked at Angela and me with a smile that carried both understanding and admiration. "You two have changed so much," she said. "But I think what's most remarkable is that you've changed together as a family." I nodded. "Yes, Aurora. We've grown not by avoiding pain, but by facing it, and we did it together honestly and with love." Angela walked past the porch carrying a box of freshly baked bread for her neighbors, waving cheerfully. I watched her go, realizing that she was no longer just my daughter. She was a person who understood responsibility, compassion, and the quiet power of integrity. Sitting back in my chair, I whispered to the stars above, "Robert, we did it. We both did it right." And as the night embraced our home, I knew that the hard lessons, the struggles, and the tears had all led to something far more valuable than wealth or comfort. They had led to understanding, to resilience, and to a love that was deep, unshakable, and forever earned. Angela had finally learned that life's true treasures are not inherited, bought, or given. They are built, piece by piece, through effort, wisdom, and the courage to rise after every fall. And in that, I found my peace. See the final image of a sunset over the ocean, the same ocean that had witnessed decades of our family's memories. The waves moved gently, as if echoing the rhythm of our story, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always moving forward. Angela stood beside me, watching the horizon. There was peace in her eyes, the kind that only comes after a long journey through pain, learning, and redemption. I realized then that our story wasn't just about loss or forgiveness. It was about rebirth. The beach house stood there, not as a monument to what we once had, but as a promise of what was still to come. It would soon be filled with laughter, hope, and the voices of women starting over, just like Angela once had. It would become a place of healing, a bridge between past wounds and future possibilities. I placed my hand on Angela's shoulder and said softly, "This is what your father would have wanted, a home that keeps giving, even when we're gone." Angela smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Then let's make it happen, Mom. Let's turn our story into hope for others." The screen slowly faded to black as the waves continued to roll in and the golden light of dusk shimmered across the water. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts below. I'd love to know which part spoke to you the most. Your support means the world and helps bring more heartfelt stories like The Lesson of the Beach House. Thank you for listening, wherever in the world you are. And remember, Sometimes love teaches through silence, and strength is born in forgiveness. Her smile faded slightly. But this morning, she came again. Didn't say a word, looked serious. Is everything all right with her? I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She must be tired, Marie, I said faintly. But inside, my pulse quickened. Another person, another sign. The pattern was no longer in my head. It was everywhere around me, taking shape, growing sharper. Something was happening to Araceli, or maybe to us all. Mrs. Jenkins' words lingered in my mind as I watched her leave the cafe. Panic mirrored in my eyes, and Carol noticed immediately. "See, Stella," she said, voice soft but firm. "It's not just you. Even the neighbors notice. Don't lie to yourself anymore. Keep writing everything down. If you have to, you may need to follow her. Not to harm her, but to protect your family." I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. Following my own daughter-in-law. Betraying the trust of the family I had spent a lifetime protecting. The thought made my stomach twist. But Carol was right. I had no choice. That afternoon, I returned home, head buzzing with unease. Araceli appeared at the door, her familiar red basket in hand. "Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit," she said softly. I nodded. As soon as she disappeared behind the gate, I opened my notebook. 3:00 p.m. Araceli leaves for the market. Basket, red. Attitude, normal. I watched the clock, counting every minute. 6 p.m. Araceli returns. Basket, blue. Voice slightly rushed. She smiled when I asked, "Did you switch baskets?" "Yes," she said lightly. "The other one broke. A friend lent me this one." My hands shook as I added to my notes. Each entry was a step closer to uncovering the truth, and a step away from the mother who only knew love and trust. The weekend arrived. Stephen left early for overtime. Matthew was at a school activity. The house was quiet, just Araceli and me. I busied myself cleaning the dining table, trying to push away the gnawing doubts. Araceli descended from her room in a pale yellow floral dress, looking as fresh and radiant as she had on her first days of marriage. "Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit," she said softly, taking her usual wicker basket. I nodded, masking my unease. Inside, a voice insisted, "Follow her. Find the truth." Without hesitation, I wrapped my shawl over my head and slipped out, keeping a careful distance. The sun burned overhead, sweat soaked my back, but I didn't care. I needed to know where she was going, what she was really doing. Araceli walked quickly down the cobblestone street toward the market. But then she turned left, into a narrow alley behind a working-class neighborhood. Old houses pressed together, peeling paint, tin roofs rusted. I slowed, heart hammering, hiding behind parked bicycles. She didn't look back. The alley narrowed further. Sunlight barely touched the cracked ground. I ducked behind a mechanic's shop, watching as she approached a weathered wooden door. She knocked softly, then slipped inside. My breath caught. My mind raced. This was not the market, not a friend's house, not anywhere she had mentioned. I wanted to confront her, to knock on the door, demand answers, but fear rooted me in place. Eventually, I turned back, each step home heavier than the last. Questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, growing sharper with every heartbeat. I had barely pushed open the gate when I froze. Araceli was in the kitchen, white blouse, chopping vegetables, cold, sharp eyes needing mine, completely different from the yellow floral dress she had left in. "Where did you go, Mom?" "Just getting back," she asked, voice controlled but cutting. My mouth went dry. A few minutes ago, I had seen her enter that alley in the yellow dress. How had she returned so quickly? And this blouse? I just went for a walk, that's all, I stammered. She didn't comment further, continuing her chopping as if nothing had happened. But my pulse wouldn't settle. Something was happening, and I was running out of time to understand it. Araceli nodded without saying anything else. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, sent a shiver down my spine. I retreated to my room under the pretense of searching for something, though the truth was to escape that look, to steady a heart racing uncontrollably. That night I sat knitting when Matthew burst into the room, cheeks flushed from playing outside. He clung to my legs, sobbing. "Grandma, my mom yelled at me just because I dropped a pencil. Not like yesterday. Yesterday, she was so nice, she even hugged me." I lifted him into my arms, stroking his hair, burning with a helpless fire inside. "Your mom was tired, honey. Don't be sad," I murmured, though my voice trembled. Matthew buried his face in my shoulder, whispering, "Grandma, I want the mom from yesterday." I hugged him tighter, tears threatening to spill. Each word cut deeper, embedding my suspicions into my chest. Sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as images replayed. Araceli in the floral dress entering the alley. Araceli in the white blouse in the kitchen. Ivan's voice, "She's on my flight." I took my notebook from the drawer, scrawling a single trembling line. Maybe they are not the same person. The words felt like a curse. The next morning, I resolved to return to the alley. I could no longer endure the doubt. Clutching the family photo from the living room, Araceli smiling next to Stephen and Matthew. I left the house determined, but terrified. The alley was unchanged, silent, somber. I paused beside a corn stand where a middle-aged woman fanned the charcoal. Holding up the photo, I asked, "Excuse me, have you seen this young woman around here?" She studied it, then pointed. "Oh, yes, she comes and goes often from the house at number 14. That one over there." I thanked her, heart hammering, and walked straight to the house. Number 14 stood with stained walls, a peeling wooden door, and a pot with a wilted daisy on the window frame. My hands trembled, as if the world itself held its breath. I knocked. Each rap reverberated through my chest. The door opened. I froze. Before me stood a woman identical to Araceli. Face, body, long black hair, except for the terror in her eyes and the rag trembling in her hands. "Araceli," I stammered. The woman flinched, trying to slam the door. Then a soft, firm voice called from inside. "Isadora, don't hide anymore. You know this is wrong too." A young woman emerged from a corner. Hair in a bun, intelligent eyes, kind expression. A faint smile on her lips. "My name is Lucy Miller, Isadora's roommate, Mrs. Brooks. Please, come in. It's time you knew the truth." I inhaled deeply, forcing my legs to obey as I stepped inside. The tin-roofed house smelled faintly of disinfectant. Walls were stained, the concrete floor cracked. In a corner, an old man coughed weakly, lying under a frayed blanket. Lucy directed me to a wooden chair. I sat feeling the air thicken. The woman identical to Araceli lowered her face, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm not Araceli. My name is Isadora." Shock froze me. Her name was unfamiliar, but the face, impossibly familiar. I clasped my hands, forcing my voice steady. "Explain to me why you look exactly like my daughter-in-law, and why you showed up at my house." Isadora's eyes brimmed with guilt, but she remained silent. Lucy poured a glass of water and sat beside her, ready to bridge the gap between truth and deception. Lucy poured water from an old plastic jug and began to speak, her voice calm and measured. "Isadora is very poor, Mrs. Brooks," she said. "Her adopted parents are very ill, especially the gentleman lying down there. A few years ago, Isidora met Araceli by chance at a market. They looked like two peas in a pod, and Araceli took advantage of that. She proposed that Isidora pretend to be her, replace her for a few hours whenever she needed. Isidora didn't want to, but Araceli paid her well, and her family needed the money for medicine. I looked at Isidora. Her head was bowed, the rag in her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Replace her for what? I asked, disbelief lacing my voice. Why would Araceli need someone to pretend to be her? Isidora lifted her head, voice trembling. I don't know everything, ma'am. She would just tell me, you stay in the house for a few hours, go to the market, take care of the boy. Then she would give me money, enough to buy my parents' medicine. I didn't dare ask for more. Tears rolled down her cheeks. My chest tightened. Every strange detail from the past months now made sense. The hand switching for writing, the sudden shifts in mood, the warmth and cold in her voice. It all fit, like the final pieces of a puzzle I had refused to see. Lucy's eyes sharpened. I don't know if this helps, but once I saw Araceli with a very elegant man. His name is Charles Thompson. I overheard it at a coffee shop. They called each other honey, very affectionately. Isidora waited outside in the car, not understanding a thing. Charles Thompson. The name felt like a knife in my chest. Ivan's words echoed. She's sitting in first class next to a rich man. The room spun. My hands shook, knocking over the glass of water. Lucy rushed to clean it, but I waved her off. Araceli is deceiving my family. I choked. Isidora broke down, sobbing. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to save my parents. I studied her, a face identical to Araceli's, yet filled with pain and regret. I wanted to scream, to rage, but all I felt was pity. She wasn't the mastermind. She was merely a pawn in Araceli's game. Everything I had trusted was unraveling. I stood, trying to steady my voice. Isidora, do you know where Araceli goes? What she does when she asks you to pretend? She shook her head, tears still flowing. I don't know, ma'am. She just tells me to do what she asks, and that she'll pay me. I don't dare ask for more. Lucy placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, then addressed me. Mrs. Brooks, I know this is painful, but Isidora is also a victim. She had no other choice. I glanced around the humble house, hearing the faint cough of the man on the cot. I understood Isidora's desperation, yet it didn't erase the sting of betrayal. My fists clenched. I don't blame you, Isidora, but I need the truth. I need to protect my son and my grandson. Rising, I felt the world collapse around me. Thank you, Lucy, for telling me. I'll be back. I left the house. The sun was blinding, but my heart felt frozen. The next morning, I returned to the alley. The stained walls and peeling wooden door had consumed my thoughts. Gripping the family photo like an amulet, I knocked on number 14. This time, Isidora opened the door with a calmer, shy expression. Mrs. Brooks, The young woman's voice was calm, but carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I was expecting you. Please, come in. The house was small, the faint scent of disinfectant hanging in the air, mingled with the weak cough of the man on the cot. I sat in the old wooden chair, trying to steady my trembling hands. Isidora, wearing a simple blouse with her hair loosely tied in a bun, looked tired but no longer frightened. I took a deep breath. Isidora, I want to meet your adoptive mother. I need to understand all of this better. She nodded, leading me to a corner of the room. On the bed lay a very thin woman with completely white hair, her cloudy eyes fixed on the ceiling. She was Mrs. Jones, Isidora's adoptive mother. I gently took her frail hand. I'm Stella Brooks, Stephen's mom, Araceli's, wife, I said, my voice trembling. Mrs. Jones breathed slowly, her words fragile. Isadora is not my blood. She's a child I adopted when she was a newborn. Her words hit me like a hammer. My chest tightened, but I forced calm. Please, tell me how it all happened. The old woman coughed and began her story. Many years ago, I was a nurse at a small-town hospital. A very poor family had twins. They were so poor they couldn't keep both. The mother cried. She said she could only care for one. The other would be abandoned. My heart broke. I couldn't let them abandon that baby, so I adopted her. That's Isadora. She paused, coughing again, before looking at Isadora with immense love. I raised her as my own, but I always knew she wanted to find her real parents. I had nothing to give her but my love and this house. My voice shook as I asked, "Do you know who Isadora's biological parents are?"
Mrs. Jones shook her head slowly. I only know they were a poor family from a nearby town. I didn't ask much. I just wanted to save the child. Isadora's face was bowed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Mrs. Brooks, I don't know anything about my biological parents," she whispered. "But when I met Araceli, I thought maybe she knew something. She looks so much like me. But she never told me." I felt the air tighten around me. Desperate for clues, I asked to see old papers. Mrs. Jones pointed to a worn wooden dresser. Isadora pulled out a yellowed envelope and handed it to me. Inside were hospital documents with her date of birth. I froze. Isadora's birth date, exactly the same as Araceli's. My hands trembled as I gripped the papers. You and Araceli could be twin sisters," I whispered. Isadora collapsed into tears, covering her face. "So Arai is my sister. Why didn't she tell me anything? Why did she make me do all that?" I looked at her, heart-shattering. Memories of Araceli, radiant, confident, perfect in every way, collided with the truth. She had deceived my family, and now I realized she had used her own sister as a pawn in her schemes. I stood, placing a firm but gentle hand on Isadora's shoulder. "From today on, I won't let anyone take advantage of you. I'll help your parents with their illness, but you must cooperate with me. Together, we will bring the truth to light, for Stephen, for Matthew." She nodded through her tears. "I will help you. I don't want to live in this lie anymore." For the first time, I saw sincerity and hope in her eyes, a small light in the storm. I left the house, walking through the alley, my soul in turmoil. The bustling market surrounded me, laughter and chatter filling the air. But in my mind, Mrs. Jones' words echoed. 2 twins, one abandoned, one living a lie. The revelation hung over the room like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. I returned home, my soul a mess, like a field ravaged by a storm. The truth about Araceli and Isadora, the secret of the twins, pressed down on me like a boulder. I stood at a crossroads, unsure how to confront the woman who had deceived us all and reveal the truth to Stephen and Matthew. That night, I called Ivan. My voice was steady, though my hands shook. "Ivan, you have to come home tomorrow night. There are things I need you to clarify." He hesitated, worry in his voice. "Mom, did something serious happen?" "Sure. Just come, honey. I need you. And bring Araceli's electronic passport," I said firmly. "No more questions." "Yes, Mom. I'll be there." I hung up, heart pounding. Tomorrow night would be unforgettable. The next day, I woke early and prepared a family dinner unlike any other. White tablecloth, candles, Stephen's favorite chili, Matthew's beloved roasted fish. I wanted this dinner to mark a before and after. Chopping vegetables in the kitchen, I reminded myself, be strong. For Stephen. For Matthew. But each slice of the knife felt like a cut in my own chest. As dusk fell, Stephen came home, tired from work.
Mom, what's all this for? Why so much food? I smiled, hiding my nerves. I just wanted a nice dinner for all of us. Sit, honey. Araceli entered in a light blue dress, a soft but nervous smile on her lips. Matthew ran to hug my legs. Grandma, the fish smells so good. I stroked his hair, heart heavy. I knew tonight would change everything. Dinner began with laughter, stories of work and school. Araceli nodded, commenting occasionally, but I noticed her hand tremble as she held her spoon. I signaled to Ivan, waiting outside. He entered, tense. Behind him came Isadora in a simple dress, her face identical to Araceli's, but her eyes full of anguish. Silence fell like a weight. Matthew looked between them, confused. Why are there two moms? Stephen paled. Araceli jumped, shouting, "What is this about, Mom?" I rose, gripping the table to steady myself. Sit down, Araceli. We need to clear everything up. I spoke, each word cutting through the room. Ivan's call from the airport. The handwriting switching hands. The mood swings. And finally, the alley, the meeting with Isadora. The truth of the twins. You and Isadora are twin sisters, I said, locking eyes with her. You used your sister to hide the truth. Now tell us the truth. Araceli trembled, her face pale as paper. She's making it up. It's a lie to humiliate me. How dare you? But Ivan slammed a stack of papers onto the table. This is a copy of your electronic passport, with entry and exit stamps from France, he said, voice cold. You cannot be at home and flying to France at the same time. Her lips pressed tight. No words came. Matthew's small voice broke the silence, pained and honest. Grandma, it's true. Some days my mom is an angel. Other days she's really mean. I don't like a mean mom. I held back tears, my chest tight. The air in the room felt like it could shatter. Everything was coming apart, and there was no turning back. The room was heavy with silence, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath a struggle. I nodded at Lucy, who had just come through the back door. Her gaze was sharp, unwavering. I saw Araceli with Charles Thompson, she said firmly. They were calling each other honey, and she hired Isadora to pretend to be her and deceive your family. Stephen turned to Araceli, voice trembling. Is it true, Araceli? Tell me, is it true? Araceli bit her lip, silent as if weighing her words. Then, in a sudden explosion of fury, she yelled, Yes, it's true. I have a lover. I'm sick of this poor life. I'm sick of being the daughter-in-law in this house. Charles gives me a life 100 times better. And you, Stephen, you're good for nothing. Her words detonated in the room. Stephen froze, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Matthew's small body trembled as he ran to hug me, sobbing. Grandma, what did my mom say? He whispered. I held him close, tears streaming down my face. My gaze met Araceli's, cold, unrepentant, empty of the warmth I had once known. Stephen rose, voice shaking. Araceli, do you really think that? She turned, gave nothing but a glare, and left. The door slammed behind her, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the air had been stolen from the house. Isadora, who had stood quietly, spoke softly, yet with clarity. Sister, you didn't have to hurt them like this. I only wanted to help, but I didn't know you'd go this far. Araceli didn't answer. She just left, vanishing from our lives like a shadow. The living room that had once echoed with Matthew's laughter and Stephen's voice now felt like a tomb. I had devoted my life to this family, and now I felt like a survivor standing amidst the ruins after a hurricane. A week later, Stephen and Araceli went to the courthouse. She didn't look at either of them, didn't plead for custody, didn't show a trace of the family she once claimed to love. The papers were signed.
she left with Charles, as if Matthew and Stephen had never existed. My heart ached, not only for Stephen, but for my innocent grandson, who deserved nothing of this pain. I held Stephen's hand, trembling. "Don't worry, honey. I'll always be here. Matthew will never be without love." But inside, I knew the scars would take time to heal. Stephen buried himself in work, silent and distant. I saw the same sorrow in his eyes that my late husband had carried in his final days. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't know how. Then Isadora appeared, a small, steady light in the darkness. Every day, she came to our home, bringing warm food, playing with Matthew, wiping his tears. Her presence was gentle, but strong, a living proof of sincerity. One afternoon, Matthew ran to her with bright eyes. "Mom, Isadora, teach me to draw a little bird." I watched, stunned as he smiled freely for the first time in weeks. Isadora laughed, stroked his hair, and said softly, "Of course, my love. But you must make it beautiful so I can see it." Tears rolled down my cheeks. Matthew's laughter, pure and innocent, filled the room like sunlight after a storm. Isadora had not only replaced Araceli in those days of deception, but she was becoming a real part of our family, with a heart full of love, patience, and truth. For the first time since the storm hit, I felt hope. Hope that our family could heal. Hope that Matthew could once again know the warmth of love untainted by lies. And most importantly, hope that truth and kindness had finally found their place in our home. One quiet evening, while I was cleaning the kitchen, Stephen called me to the living room. My heart skipped a beat. There he was, holding a small ring, hands trembling, eyes full of determination. Isadora stood beside him, her face flushed, eyes shining like sunlight breaking through clouds. Stephen knelt. "Isadora, I don't want to waste any more time. You brought light back to me and Matthew. Will you be my wife and Matthew's mom?" Isadora broke down in tears, glancing at me as if seeking my approval. I walked over, gently holding her hand. "You deserve it, honey. You've been part of this family for a long time." She hugged me, tears soaking my shoulder, and in that instant, I felt our family beginning to heal. Their wedding was small, simple, yet overflowing with love. I stood in the yard, listening to Matthew's laughter as he proudly wore his little suit, acting as his dad's tiny best man. Ivan had flown back from work and stood beside his brother, smiling like the proud pilot he was. I sat in the front row, tears streaming, not of sorrow, but pure joy. Isadora held Stephen's hand, radiant in her simple wedding dress, and I knew our family had finally found a sincere heart. Life returned to its gentle rhythm. Isadora cared for Stephen and Matthew with tenderness, sang Celito Lindo to Matthew at bedtime, and shared quiet, proud moments with Stephen every night. Matthew no longer asked about his other mom. He snuggled close to Isadora, calling her mom with a smile that could light up the darkest day. Late one night, I sat on the porch, wind brushing softly across the garden. Inside, Matthew's laughter mixed with Isadora's gentle voice. Stephen concentrated on his work, while Isadora prepared a cup of tea, placing it by his side and kissing his forehead. I smiled. My heart was finally at peace. From the first uneasy doubts, Ivan's call from the airport, to that dark alley and the truth about the twins, I had walked a long, painful path. But as Raphael always said, the truth will set you free. And it did. It brought Isadora into our lives, giving us a brighter, happier beginning. This story, with names and places changed, isn't told to judge, but to remind us that mothers often suffer in silence in their own homes. If you were in my place, what would you do? Stay quiet to preserve peace, or dare to face the truth to reclaim your voice? Courage lights the path to better days, and sometimes the truth is the gift that brings a family back together.